Ever since this past Saturday, when the new Tokyo Ghoul chapter came out, Tokyo Ghoul Re Chapter 75, many Chibits told me that there was more to that quote than what I said, and this was brought to my attention by multiple Chibits in the comments, and so I'm just going to mention a few here, the first ones I saw and I took pictures of. The full line is, the bird fights its way out of the egg. The egg is the world. Who would be born must first destroy a world. The bird flies to God. That God's name is Abraxas. Now, when I saw this constantly commented in the comments, obviously I decided to check out what the hell this quote was, like the entirety of the quote, and look more into it, but also find out more about the god named Abraxas. Now, all day long, ever since early this morning, even before I was actually working on Taizai, I've been looking into Abraxas, looking up his myths, his lore, his connection to Sophia, different gods and stuff like that. And eventually, I came down to a lot of good points I want to discuss. And so, first things first, I want to thank all of the Chibits that brought this entire full quote to my attention and allowed me to look more into this. I want to thank all of you Chibits for that. Thank you so much. This video wouldn't be possible if you didn't bring that all to my attention about the entire quote. Before I even get into the Abraxas, I need to actually set down the foundation, the groundwork to what the main point of the video is. And let's dive into the final page of the recent chapter Tokyo Ghoul Re. Kaneki Kin, or used to be known as Heisei Sasaki, he has now undergone another change. He has now shed his old skin and been reborn into something new. He has now learned to protect himself, and that means that he can protect others. For instance, he has now learned to live. It's not about dying anymore when it comes to his motives anymore, on his agenda. He now wants to live, and he's trying to find a reason to continue on living. And so because of this, Kaneki has made a massive change in his psyche. He is now a completely different person in terms of the way he stands. And for instance, he's at a new pinnacle of life, and it's now like he has a clean slate, a blank slate, which goes into some of the symbolism I want to get into. As I think some of you might know, white in Japan symbolizes death. Here is another meaning to white that I want to kind of express to all of you. So I'm going to read this real quick to you, this quick paragraph. I'll link this in the description if you want to see the entire paragraph, but I'm just going to read the big, quick part of it that I want to get my point across. White is a color at its most complete and pure, the color of perfection. The color meaning of white is purity, innocence, wholeness, and completion. Kind of obvious things that we already knew of. In color psychology, white is the color of new beginnings. For instance, Kaneki taking a new route with his life, a new beginning. He is now wanting to continue to live, not someone that wants to die. A color of new beginnings, a new life, rebirth. Wiping the slate clean, so to speak. Wiping his slate of wanting to constantly die, a new beginning. It is the blank canvas, waiting to be written upon. White is easy to be stained. You can have any type of color you want on it because it can constantly be changed. You can have any color to write a new path. The white hair symbolism of Kaneki. While white isn't stimulating to the senses, it opens the way for the creation of anything the mind can conceive. White contains an equal balance of all the colors of the spectrum, representing both the positive and the negative aspects of all colors, implying fairness, impartiality, neutrality, and independence. It is interesting to note that babies come into the world with a perfect balance of white, ready to imprint their lives with all colors of the spectrum, hopefully from all of their life experiences. For instance, what this means is Kaneki is pretty much like a baby now. He is now someone that has been reborn with a clean slate. He is someone now that is striving and going down a new path, not a path that he already determined long ago. This is a path he just now realized he's now changing himself to become something even better than he once was, which this actually directly goes along with the black hair Kaneki got earlier on in this arc. For instance, white is easy to be stained. Black cannot be stained, because it was already stained to begin with. Heisei Sasaki was a cross between the two. For instance, Sasaki was someone that was pure, but not pure. He was at the border. He was a dream. And when Kaneki finally woke up and realized all the things that has happened since the very beginning of his life, he realized the truth about what his mother has done to him, what all has happened. And when we actually finally found out about this, and he found out about this, his hair became black because he was stained. So I like the meaning of this, the opposite meaning of the black hair to the white hair, and also interpretations of how white in Japan could mean death, which that's what I'm going to get into. For instance, the white hair that Kaneki currently has could symbolize as Kaneki's death of his old self and birth of his new self. Now that I've said that, you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with Abraxas? Like, what the fuck does this have to do with this person? So, to quickly dive into it, or not quickly, I'm actually going to dive into it and kind of express my thoughts over the entire subject and bring, hopefully, new things to the table for many of you Chibitskin to discuss. Abraxas is a god. He's a god that's pretty much a mix between good and evil. Yin and yang. Light and dark. And this represents constant patterns we have seen in Tokyo Ghoul. Now, many Chibits might know this because I've explained it in the past, but I want to bring it up here because it's time I do, because it actually goes along with this video and suits Abraxas and the entire meaning of his being, and also what is currently going on in Tokyo Ghoul. As you know, the checkered board pattern that goes on in Tokyo Ghoul, it actually stands for many different things. Good, evil, black, white, light, dark, yin, yang, law and order, and different types of meanings alongside of that. And because of this, Abraxas, he is someone that is both. He is good and evil. He is someone that is light and dark. And now that you factor all that in, you're probably still wondering, what does this still have to do with Kaneki? Why does Abraxas really connect with him in any way? Besides the quote being used in Tokyo Ghoul, there's a couple of things I noticed that Ishida did take from some of the things I've seen from Abraxas, which I want to bring up now. So, Abraxas' overall depiction. Now, Abraxas is depicted such as this. He is a god with a chicken head like a rooster, a human body, and serpent/scorpion legs. Now, I'm going to probably have these images up throughout the entire video, but look at this picture of Abraxas, and then look at this picture of Kaneki. Kaneki's entire form right quick here. This form that Kaneki has gotten in Chapter 74 of Tokyo Ghoul Re, it looks very similar to Abraxas. Now, let me explain the head feature here. Now, it's not that we got it all wrong to begin with about the serpent to the dragon. It's actually very similar because Abraxas has been kind of symbolized to be some form of a chimera, different types of animal species. But the one he's most commonly known by is the rooster-type head, the human body, and the serpent legs with a tail. And we see these type of features with Kaneki's new Kakuja. For instance, look at this picture. You see Kaneki's side of his face. Now, at first glance, you can kind of see some snake-looking marks, and it does look like a dragon face, which many Chibits were talking about when I was doing this chapter review for Chapter 74. But look even closer. Look at this face of Kaneki with the Kakuja. And then look at Abraxas in his entire head structure. It looks like a rooster. You see the top of Kaneki's hair, the way it's coming down, it looks like the top of what you see of a rooster. Interesting stuff. And then the way the mouth is done as well. And it's not just that either. When you go and look at Kaneki's legs, it's in a spiral similar to Abraxas' legs, like a serpent. Look at that. That's interesting. Now, the next thing to look at is Abraxas' signature hands. His hands are what he holds. He has a hand for power and a hand for wisdom. And this is the interesting thing about this. Because the shield hand, the left hand, is symbolized to be protective wisdom. Abraxas' wisdom. And if you look at Kaneki's Kakuja form, his left hand is actually not bulky. It doesn't look like something that could protect something. But his right hand looks like it could, which is the strange thing, and let me explain. The right hand is symbolized as power, authority. Left hand, protective wisdom. Sophia, relations to Sophia in the lore of Abraxas. If you want to look up more of Sophia, most likely I'll have it linked in the comments below. But the left hand symbolizes wisdom, the human side of Kaneki. For instance, him knowing about the human side, his wisdom on what he has experienced when he was a human, but also what he has currently been through as a ghoul. His right side is the power to get things done, but also the power to understand the other side, the ghoul side. And it's kind of like a cross. Kaneki is in both worlds, but he can now understand both sides, which this has been building up since the very beginning. Since part 1, Tokyo Ghoul. We had this entire conversation towards the end with Kaneki talking about how he doesn't belong anywhere. Right here, he says he does not belong anywhere, but in fact, he's always been both, and he has the best way to understand both sides, ghouls and humans. So now, with this Kakuja, it's taken the form of Abraxas, and it's also showing the side of wisdom, his wisdom of both sides, and also the power of both sides, but also to change things. So I love how Ishida Sensei has actually used this concept, this god, this design of a god, and formed it into more of a symbolic meaning with Kaneki of how he actually looks now. And it just blows my mind when you actually see some of the things that Ishida Sensei writes. Now, the next thing I need to talk about is the writer of the 7 Sermons to the Dead. This writer was actually someone that dived in a little bit to Abraxas, the god. Dived into him a little bit, and he was a person that actually used to wear a ring that actually had the symbol of Abraxas on it. And it's interesting stuff, and in the history of this person, this is an author, a famous author, and most likely since we already know Ishida has used famous works in the past, for instance, Dazai or Kafka and stuff like that, we know for a fact that Ishida uses other works from other books, other literature. And when you take a moment to look at the history behind this person, he was the writer of 7 Sermons to the Dead. And in his brief history as the writer's history, in November 1913, Jung commenced an extraordinary exploration of the psyche or soul. He called it the confrontation with the unconscious. During this period, Jung willfully entered imaginative or visionary states of consciousness. The visions continued intensely from the end of 1913 until 1917, and then abated by around 1923. Jung carefully recorded this imaginative journey in 6 black-colored personal journals, referred to as the Black Books. These notebooks provide a date chronological ledger of his visions and dialogues with his soul. Now, let me explain what this means. You're probably wondering, what the fuck does this have to do with, Abraxas, to Kaneki, to Tokyo Ghoul in general, and how Ishida writes? Well, we know Ishida loves using references to different type of authors and literature and stuff like that, especially how he took one of the quotes from a famous author, how he took it from Herman. And when you see this right here, what does this remind you of? The history of this author trying to confront or explore his psyche or soul. It reminds me of Kaneki. Look, I'll show this on the screen here. This right here is an example of Kaneki in the side of his mind, in his soul, confronting himself, talking with himself, and at the point of his consciousness to where he is finding out what is going on within himself. For instance, very similar to what Jung was doing, how he was trying to discover more about himself, his psyche, his soul. And I'm not going to say exactly all these things are similar, but we do know Ishida loves taking things from famous authors. And it's kind of impressive how maybe Ishida got inspired by Jung to do some of these internal conversations with Kaneki and his other self, or his self inside of his mind, from Jung. So it's cool stuff. So overall, hopefully you all learned something about this. Just the design of Kaneki's Kakuja is very similar to Abraxas, and also the way he wields the power and wisdom now of both sides. And he is now a blank slate. He is someone that is not stained from his past. He is now on a new path, a new beginning. It's cool stuff. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe I'm overthinking this. That's a very likely possibility. And also remember, this is just a theory. This is not, something you should take as if it's concrete. I'm just letting you know this is my interpretation of some of the things that are going on, or what I have recently learned. So you all have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. And thank you all those that brought up this in the comments below on Chapter 75. Please be safe. Chibi out.